Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Monique Antoinette-Lewis, founder of At the Inkwell. And tonight is a very, very special night for both for me and the authors. So I created At the Inkwell about 2.5 years ago. And I created it to support published authors through feature articles, book reviews, and the reading series here at KGB Bar. And over the past couple of years, I've had so many writers be so supportive and helping me to grow this series. And I'm just very, very thankful to all the writers the past couple of years who've helped continue to just inspire me to continue pushing forward for At the Inkwell. And I'm especially very, very honored for the writers tonight. So I would say this inspiration really started when I was studying my MFA at Wilkes University. And my mentor, Kaylee Jones, we're celebrating some of the authors tonight from Kaylee Jones' books. Kaylee Jones was my mentor, and I really enjoy working with Kaylee. I'm trying not to cry. We had a very special writer's bond as a writer and mentor. And so it's just a nice full circle to have Kaylee reading here tonight. Because when I first started in the program, I had a very special story close to me that she's the one who really believed in it the most and has always been my #1 supporter for the novel. And so I'm just very thankful to have Kaylee here. So thank you, Kaylee. And so with that, because of Wilkes University, it really just instilled in me this passion to support other writers, because the support that I got through both Kaylee and Wilkes and my peers who are also here tonight, Barb Taylor, and who I actually got to know after the MFA program. And we have one of Kaylee Jones's newest authors from her imprint, Kaylee Jones Books, who's also reading tonight as well, Matthew McGetna. So, all around and so with that, I want to welcome Kaylee. And so, Kaylee has published 7 books, including a memoir, Lies My Mother Never Told Me, and her most recent novel, The Anger Meridian. Her novel, A Soldier's Daughter Never Cries, was adapted as a Merchant Ivory film in 1998. Jones has been teaching for more than 25 years and is a faculty member in the Stony Brook Southampton MFA in Creative Writing and Literature program, and in Wilkes University's MFA in Creative Writing program. She is the author of Speak Now and the editor of Long Island Noir. Her newest endeavor is her publishing imprint with Akasha Books, Kaylee Jones Books. Let's welcome Kaylee.
So now I have to read after that. Oh my God. Okay, so I'm going to read from my new novel, and I'm going to read a sort of self-contained scene. And all you need to know really is that the narrator, Marin, and her daughter have picked up a stray pregnant dog in the streets of San Miguel de Allende, and this dog is a mess, and she's very small and very, very pregnant and very hungry, and she's in bad shape, and the FBI just showed up the day before and took away all of Marin's her laptop and her phone and everything, so she has no they're trying to find out what happened to her husband, who died the week before, and so she has no money, no credit cards, no phone, no computer, and she's staying with her mother, who's a terror, and the mother hates dogs, so they snuck the dog into the house, and the dog is hiding in a box in their bedroom, in the mom and the daughter's bedroom. Tuesday, Tenny's shaking me awake. I took an Ambien, and I'm having a hard time focusing. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Mommy, wake up. Mommy, something's wrong with Sophia. The dog is lying on her side, completely listless, unable to summon the energy to sit up. Her vagina is opening and closing, but clearly she doesn't have any strength left to push. How come her bum is doing that, Tenny asks. That's not her bum, honey, that's her vagina. The babies are trying to come out. We wait and wait some more. An hour passes and nothing improves. I'm sorry to cause you all this trouble, Sophia's guilty look seems to say. It's a terrible thing to watch, and I don't know what to do. I'm reminded of when I was in labor with Tenny, lying in the hospital, feeling utterly helpless and alone. Beau was out of the country. He had his secretary, Jean Wallace, send me a dozen long-stem roses. I don't even have my smartphone or my laptop to look up on the internet what to do. The digital clock on the bedside table reads 2:35 a.m. I find my mother's doctor, Dr. Hanson, she calls him. I find his card in my wallet and dial the first of the two numbers with a trembling hand. It rings and rings. Hello? A hoarse, rusty voice. I've definitely woken him up. I'm sorry to call you so late, Dr. Fuller. This is Marin Huntley, Vivienne's daughter. You were here Saturday. I hear him breathing, apparently trying to process this information. We have an emergency, I plow on, wondering if he might be at his girlfriend's house, and if he'll tell his girlfriend, and she'll tell my mother, but I don't have time to worry about that right now. Is your mother all right, he asks. It's not my mother, Dr. Fuller. My daughter's dog has been in labor for several hours, and she's listless, and she's unresponsive. Your daughter's dog? I don't know anybody in San Miguel, Dr. Fuller. I don't know anybody. We just got here from Dallas a few days ago. I need help. I'm not a vet. I'm not sure. Please don't hang up on me, Dr. Fuller. This is an emergency. She's going to die. Let me pull myself together. 15 minutes later, we hear his motorcycle roaring up the mountain. I run to let him in before he can ring the bell. Still, it's a good thing that my mother's quarters are on the other side of the house, and she's such a good sound sleeper, and the streets of San Miguel are generally so noisy. He's wearing a faded black t-shirt and black jeans and his ostrich cowboy boots, and has his black nylon backpack over one shoulder. As soon as he steps into the patio, Tenny throws her arm around his waist and hugs him. He's so surprised, he stands immobile, arms akimbo. Come quick, Dr. Hanson, she says. This way, pulling him by the hand. Back in our room, he's already kneeling by Sophia's box, slipping his hands into latex gloves. It's inertia, he says. She's just exhausted, probably half-starved, and the puppies are too big. She doesn't look good. Is this a San Miguel stray? Her name is Sophia, Tenny tells him. She's had a very bad time since she was abandoned. I don't doubt it, says Dr. Fuller while he palpates the dog's distended belly. He pours some kind of disinfectant over his gloved hands and inserts 2 fingers into her vagina. What are you doing? Tenny asks nervously. I'm trying to see what's going on. I'm so grateful to him for not laughing at us. I feel like crying. It's probably the Ambien. The situation must seem completely absurd to him. It seems absurd to me. What have I gotten us into? What if she dies? What if she doesn't die but needs medical care or hospitalization? Are people even allowed to bring Mexican dogs back to the States? It's okay, Sophia, says Tenny. Dr. Hanson is going to take care of you. You can call me Dr. Steve. He takes a syringe out of a sealed plastic packet and fills it with liquid from a vial. I'm going to give her something to stimulate her contractions, he says. I had that. It didn't work, I say, as if this could possibly be helpful or of any interest to him. A little while later, he reaches inside the dog and pulls out a slimy, watery, balloon-like sack that looks way too big for the dog. He tears the sack open and wipes the fluid from the tiny nose and mouth, checks for a heartbeat with his stethoscope. This one is dead, he says calmly, without emotion. No, cries Tenny, tears pouring from her eyes. More are coming, he tells her. Let's focus on those, okay? The next one comes quickly. Sophia tries to lift her head to see, but barely has the strength. I feel tears on my own cheeks too, and I don't know why I'm crying. Dr. Fuller is holding the second puppy cupped in his hands, and he's swinging his arms up and down, up and down. He rubs the inert thing's belly with his thumbs. Come on, he says, come on. A squeak, then the tiny mouth opens, and he places the squirming white hairless thing against Sophia's belly. It searches blindly for the nipple. Sophia is compliant, relieved almost, trying to wag her tail, sniffing and licking at the thing. "This one's a girl," says Dr. Handsome. The third one is the smallest, and after Dr. Fuller has cleared away the amniotic membrane and the mucus and severed the umbilical cord, he listens through his stethoscope and seems to have some trouble finding a heartbeat. Meanwhile, I'm whispering in a tumble of words the story of how we met Sophia and how Tenny made me go back and how I just couldn't talk her out of it. And Sophia is very well trained, not wild at all, as if I'm trying to convince him. He holds the puppy cupped in his hands and swings his arms up and down again. "What are you doing?" I ask in a whisper. "I'm trying to clear the lungs of fluid." Finally, there's a little squeak and he places the wriggling thing that looks like a naked mole rat next to the other one by Sophia's belly. This one's a little boy. He washes Sophia's back end and legs with the disinfectant, wipes everything down, and then clears away the bloody towels. He asks if we have any clean towels to put down. Tenny runs to the bathroom. My mother is just going to have a wail. He wraps the dead puppy in the folds of a soiled towel, then places the bundle carefully in his backpack. "Thank you, Dr. Steve, thank you," Tenny says. "There are hundreds of strays like her all over this town," he says. "But they're not Sophia," Tenny explains. "She's special. She points to the dogs, to the puppies. "That one is Lola, and that one is Zorro." "Zorro?" asks Dr. Fuller. "Sophia thinks you're Zorro, so we're naming him after you." Dr. Fuller starts to laugh, a strange, guttural, almost reluctant sound. After a long moment, he says to Tenny, "You're special." "How much do I owe you, Dr. Fuller?" I ask, looking around for my bag. "Nothing," he says. "I'm not a vet." "Well, at least let us donate to your children's clinic." I hand him a $100 bill. He thanks me solemnly, then folds the bill and slips it into the back pocket of his jeans. We sit quietly for a while, watching the two puppies nurse. Sophia seems to be regaining some of her aplomb. "If you need help at your clinic, Dr. Fuller, I have nothing but time. I have no medical experience, but I could do other things," I offer. "I used to teach English as a second language. Maybe I could teach the kids?" What am I doing? I must be high as a kite on this damn Ambien. I don't even like children, except for Tenny, and she's like an old person in a child's body. He glances at me in surprise. I always need help. Dr. Fuller tells us we need to feed Sophia very well for the next few weeks. The next few weeks? We're probably not even going to get through tomorrow. He says we need to take her to a vet to make sure she's all right and check her for worms and giardia. Tenny makes up a bed for herself on the floor next to the box, and as soon as she curls herself around the box and puts her head down on the pillow, she's asleep. I asked Dr. Fuller if he'd like me to bring him a drink. He says he doesn't drink at all. How about coffee? He says he'll take a rain check on the coffee. I walk him back out through the patio. The birds are starting to chirp, though the sky is still dark. They sense the coming of dawn, even though it feels to me like the middle of the night. "My mother hates dogs," I whisper to him. "She doesn't know about this. I had a dog once when I was little, in Cameroon. I was a little girl. His name was Arsène Lupin. We had to leave him with the neighbors, and I haven't had a dog since. I'm babbling again, and I don't know why. I never babble. I never talk. You will never know anything about me. I didn't want to bring this dog home, but Tenny just wouldn't let it go. I couldn't force her to walk away," I explain. "I feel like a fool. Why do I keep trying to make excuses to him?" At the door, he turns and places a hand on my arm. "I'm glad you called me," he says, a reluctant smile stretching his thin lips. "I don't often get to feel like Zorro." He straddles the seat and kickstarts his motorcycle with his beat-up cowboy boot. I watch as the taillight recedes down the street's steep incline and disappears around the corner. I keep listening for a long time while the roar of the engine wanes in the distance and finally becomes indistinct, merging with the chattering of birds. Thank you.
So I forgot to make a quick introduction. My new host is Jennifer Technecki, standing by my side. And Jen is taking on the new series, taking on the series as I move back home to Colorado and Denver, beginning next month. And also, we've expanded to San Francisco, and I'll be starting a new series there in Denver, while Jen continues to lead and curate the series here in New York. So I've known Jen for, oh my gosh, like 5 years now. So, and she is a great fiction writer, great personality. I think you're all going to love her. And with that, Jen is going to continue taking over tonight's hosting. Thank you.
So up next is Barbara Taylor. She was born and raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and teaches high school English. She has an MFA in creative writing from Wilkes University. Publishers Weekly named her first novel, Sing in the Morning, Cry at Night, a top summer read in 2014. The sequel, All Waiting Is Long, is due to be released in June or July 2016. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Monique. This has been an amazing series, and somebody from Scranton, Pennsylvania, it's really a thrill to come to New York City and read, so I appreciate that. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, number one, what a great reading Kaylee Jones just gave, and number two, every bit of success that I have had with this book, I have to give her credit. She's my mentor, my publisher, my dear friend, and I'd be lost without her, so thank you for that. This is my second novel. I'll be reading from the second novel tonight, All Waiting Is Long. It's actually a sequel to Sing in the Morning, Cry at Night, which is about a little girl who's blamed for the death of her sister in 1913, Scranton, Pennsylvania. The books are self-contained, so you don't need to know really much about the first. The second one stands on its own. In both books, I'd say every 6 or 7 chapters, I start with a helpful hint and a chorus of church women who think that they're well-intended, and then I go into the chapters. So tonight, I would simply like to start with the first chorus and read chapter 1. All waiting is long. All are agreed it is important that the boy be given some sex instruction. No such agreement exists concerning sex knowledge for the girl. Some say that such instruction is unnecessary because the sex instinct awakens in girls comparatively late, and it is time enough for them to learn about such matters after they are married. Woman, Her Sex and Love Life by Dr. William J. Robinson, 1929. When Izzy passed on, it seemed fitting to christen ourselves the Isabel Lumley Bible class. After all, she was the one who came up with the idea for our Wednesday women's scripture meetings. At least that's how she told it. Those of us who were there from the beginning remember different, but no sense beating that drum again. Let the dead rest is what we say. Besides, Izzy left enough money to Providence Christian Church to erase any hard feelings and repair the crumbling steeple. A Bible verse or two and a potluck lunch make for an edifying afternoon. And a much-needed one, given the moral decline we see today. Gambling, joyriding, bootlegging, not to mention the goings-on in the alleys downtown, a regular red light district, our very own Sodom and Gomorrah, right here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Surely we're glimpsing the end times. That's why it's so comforting to have a man like Reverend Sheets in the pulpit, an optimist through and through. Somehow he always manages to come back around to Noah's Ark and that rainbow promise. An uplifting sentiment, though it wouldn't hurt to hear a different Bible lesson from time to time. Maybe something from the New Testament. Why, just the other day we were studying that verse in Matthew about pointing out a speck in your brother's eye while ignoring a beam in your own. There's folks in our congregation could benefit from such wisdom. Hattie Goodfellow, for one. Or should we say, Hattie Goodfellow Hatton. Always looking down her nose at us, but who's the real sinner? Marrying that fellow from her boarding house and traipsing off to Buffalo at her age. Here we thought she ran a respectable place. And now we're told that her nieces, Violet and Lily, are headed up north to help her? Can't say why, but something doesn't ring true about that story. If Hattie needs help setting up house, maybe she's too old to be a newlywed. Not that that's our affair. Who are we to judge? I just wish she'd asked our opinion before leaping. Now that the deed is done, God bless and good luck. And if the marriage comes to ruin, as we fear it might, we'll welcome Hattie back with open arms. That's the Christian way. Chapter 1. Violet and Lily trudged to the rear of the Good Shepherd Infant Asylum and entered through the kitchen. According to the widow Lankowski who'd made the arrangements, only benefactors, adoptive couples, physicians, and members of the clergy were allowed to use the front door. The Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary instituted this practice years earlier in order to protect the identities of the expectant mothers they served. "Don't let the door slam," a fire plug of a girl yelled from across the room. Lily pressed her hand against the oak panel and eased it shut. A stripe of fresh snow spanned the length of the threshold. "The latch catches." The girl stood at the sink with her back to the newcomers. A tangle of red curls settled just beyond her shoulders. "Don't want to lock out all of our gentlemen callers," she laughed, throaty and low. "Names?" "Violet Morgan and my sister, Lily." Violet stepped onto a rag rug and stomped her boots. Lily remained on the bare linoleum. Water puddled at her feet. "The Protestants are here," the girl called out as she washed the last plate in the dishpan and dried her hands. "No rest for the wicked," she turned and smiled at the pair, exposing her swollen belly. "So which one of you is in the pudding club?" she asked. Her eyes darted across their stomachs. "That will be all, Muriel." A tall woman robed in dark blue serge glided into the room. "If you hurry, you'll just make confession." Her brittle voice cracked on the word confession as if failing to hit a note out of range. Embarrassment ignited the girl's cheeks, and she started for the doorway. "You can't tell us all." "Our mother carried small," Violet explained. "Confession," the nun repeated, patting a gold crucifix that hung from a chain around her neck. Muriel winked at Lily from behind the nun, crossed one swollen ankle behind the other, grabbed both sides of her dress, and bowed. Without looking back, the nun added, "And you might want to save that curtsy for His Holiness should he ever visit us here in Philadelphia." Muriel slinked out of the room. "I'm Mother Mary Joseph." The woman took a step forward, and the rosary beads at her waist rattled in time. "Reverend Mother, you must be the young ladies from Scranton." "Yes, ma'am." Violet let go of the 2 suitcases she'd carried from the train station and pulled her younger sister Lily onto the rug. Even with 9 years between them, the Morgan girls shared a strong likeness. Fair Welsh complexions, small even teeth, dimpled left cheeks. Yet in spite of their similarities, people often referred to Lily as the pretty one. Her large round eyes were blue instead of brown. Her features soft, not angular like Violet's. And Lily's hair? A worn chocolate, not that unforgiving pitch. It was as if an artist had sketched the same face twice, opting for a lighter hand the second time. "It's most unusual for us to house both a charge and her sister." The nun poked her hand out from a fan of sleeve and motioned the visitors forward, past a pallet stacked with brushes, paint cans, and thinner. But Father Zarnowski from St. Stanislaus's in Scranton requested the arrangement. Mother Mary Joseph sat down at the head of the table in the center of the room and nodded for Violet and Lily to each take a chair on either side of her. And then, when your friend Mrs. Lankowski made her generous donation to the Good Shepherd, the nun waved toward a freshly painted wall. Well, how could we say no? She pressed her lips into a thin smile and reached for a small bell on the table. "Have you had your supper?" "On the train." 25-year-old Violet noticed the absence of wrinkles on the woman's pale skin and wondered about her age. Under the dark veil, a starched band of white fabric stretched around her forehead, and another one framed her cheeks and neck. A large bib-like collar circled her chest and shoulders in that same stiff white material. The woman possessed a confidence suggestive of age, but Violet could not see it on her face. "A cup of tea, then," the nun said, ringing the bell, "to take the chill off." "Thank you." Violet kicked Lily's foot under the table. Lily, head bowed, fingers tracing the tablecloth's blue and red roses, seemed not to notice. Muriel appeared in the doorway. "Everyone's at chapel." "Not everyone," Mother Mary Joseph sighed. "Make yourself useful then and put on the kettle." The girl scurried halfway across the room before she seemed to remember herself and her ungainly body. She stopped for a moment, caught her breath, and took measured steps toward the sink. "Let's see now." The nun began pulling items from the folds of her garment. A pair of eyeglasses, which she positioned halfway down her nose, a small ledger, leather-bound in black, several pencils newly sharpened, and 2 handkerchiefs embroidered with the letters IHM. She opened the ledger to the day's date, Saturday, February 22nd, 1930, licked the tip of the closest pencil, and pushed a handkerchief toward Lily. "How old are you, child?" 16. Lily's gaze remained fixed on the tablecloth. 1 week from today. "Look at me when I speak to you." Mother Mary Joseph lifted the girl's chin and studied her swollen eyes. "That's better." She offered another flattened smile and made a notation. "It's my understanding that your confinement should be for a period of 3 months. Lily glanced across the table at her sister, then back at the nun. "Yes, ma'am." Her lower lip quivered. "You're absolutely certain?" The Reverend Mother pulled back Lily's coat and studied her belly. 6 months along, as near as I can figure. Under the table, Violet pressed her right pinky against her leg. When counting off, she always started with the pinky. March, April, May. Her index finger and thumb remained aloft, aimed in Lily's direction. "I've ruined everything." Lily reached for the handkerchief and burst into tears. Air charged from Violet's nostrils. Her shoulders curved down around her deflating lungs. Lily had ruined everything. Violet was a forgiving person, goodness knows she had to be. But enough was enough. Lily never considered the consequences for her behavior. She only thought of herself. Had she ever wondered what her delicate condition would do to their nervous mother? Had she ever weighed the cost of hiding it from their ailing father? And what about the widow Lankowski? How humiliating it had been when Violet's mother dragged the woman into what should have been a family matter. Not that Violet didn't think of the widow as family. Why, she'd practically raised Violet. But it was embarrassing all the same. And then there was the matter of her promise to Stanley. A secret only the widow was privy to. Lily couldn't have knowingly complicated their plan to elope, but still. Violet would probably be at the Good Shepherd Infant Asylum long after Stanley returned home to Scranton, and hand to God, that was Lily Morgan's fault. "Don't be cross with me." Lily blew her nose into the handkerchief and refolded it. "Not now." Violet pushed both words through gritted teeth. "Stanley will wait." Lily continued dabbing her eyes with a dry corner of linen. "You'll see." "Stanley?" Mother Mary Joseph tugged off her glasses and pursed her lips. "Hush!" Violet glared at Lily. "Don't drag him into this." "The widow Lankowski's son," Lily explained. "Adopted. More of a son than most." Violet dug her fingernails into her thigh. The nun picked up her glasses, curled the wires around her ears, and started to write. "So this Stanley," she looked up at Lily. "He's responsible for your trouble?" "No," the pair responded in tandem. "He's Violet's intended," Lily said, emphasizing her sister's name as if she had an intended of her own. Violet slapped her palms on top of the table. "You knew?" she whispered, as if saying the words too loudly would make them true. "Stop yelling at me!" Lily looked over at the Reverend Mother. "She's always yelling at me." Violet parceled out her words quietly, evenly. "I'm not yelling. You're yelling at me in that low voice of yours." When no one came to Lily's defense, she continued. "Mother found out you were planning to run away with him." Violet started up from her chair and leaned toward her sister. "And just how did she find out?" The nun patted Violet's hand, encouraging her to take her seat. Lily gulped and squeezed her eyes shut. When she finally spoke, her words charged forth on a single breath. "I heard you and the widow talking on Christmas Eve." Violet cursed herself for being so careless. And you couldn't wait to tell Mother. She made me. She didn't know about it. Violet stamped both feet, rattling the table. How could she make you? Lily's eyes popped open. I didn't want you running away with Stanley. I didn't want to be left alone. Well, you got your wish. We're together now. It was your idea to come with me. Lily's cheeks flushed. I certainly don't need a keeper. You've done a fine job so far. Oh, and you're so perfect. Lily turned to the nun. Our parents don't approve of Stanley, him being Catholic and all. She cleared her throat conspiratorially, not to mention Polish. But that doesn't seem to matter to her. She tossed her head toward Violet. Silence filled the room as the Reverend Mother considered the matter. When she finally spoke, her words lacked any trace of sentimentality. Our Lord in heaven commands us to honor thy father and thy mother. The nun pushed the second handkerchief toward Violet. And experience cautions us against mixed marriages. Experience? The word reverberated in Violet's ear like a sour note at the piano. What experience might a nun have? How could someone married to Jesus understand real love? Violet twisted the hanky as if wringing it out to dry. I've honored my parents all my life, she finally managed. You'll not find a more devoted daughter. Violet shot a look at Lily and the nun, daring either one to dispute her claim. Lily's lips parted briefly, but without result. Tea's ready, Muriel said, breaking the silence. She placed the teapot, creamer, sugar bowl, and spoons next to 3 cups and saucers already on the tray and carried them to the table. A 4th cup sat cooling on the stove behind her. Don't mind me, she said. I'm not even here. Mother Mary Joseph emptied the tray and poured the tea. Muriel backed away from the table, hoisted herself onto a stool near the wall, and quietly sipped her drink. Now, in the matter of the child, the nun warmed her hands over her cup. We seek good Christian homes and try to consider creed and appearance when making a match. For instance, a tow-headed child in a family of Turks would cause a stir. The Reverend Mother fixed her gaze on Lily, but cast her voice in Violet's direction. We find it best to keep them with their own kind. Though reeling from the nun's comments, Violet couldn't bring herself to argue. Truth be told, from the moment she knew Lily's baby would be adopted out, she pictured the child being raised by a family similar to her own. Welsh, Protestant, fair-skinned. The father a hard-working miner, and the mother a dark-haired beauty. They'd probably be poor like most, but no matter, as long as they raised the child to fear God. But enough of that. Mother Mary Joseph closed her notebook and slipped it into her pocket. The 2 of you must be exhausted from your trip. Yes, ma'am, Lily answered when Violet remained silent. Muriel, will you show the girls to their beds after they finish their tea? The nun turned and stared at the girl. Since you're still so close at hand. Muriel's cheeks reddened again as she lowered herself from the stool. Gladly. Get some rest now, the Reverend Mother said as she rose from the table. 6:30 comes early. Pardon? Lily's head snapped up. Mass begins promptly at 7. Before Lily had a chance to object, the nun added, and attendance is required. Here at the Good Shepherd, we're all God's children. Thank you.
Hi everyone, we're going to get started. But just before we get started, we're going to have a special announcement by Donna Ferrara. She's always been a very strong supporter of the At the Inkwell series. And she also writes fiction, so thank you, Donna.
Hi, as you may know, Bridget and I are the cookie ladies, and every time we come here, we are just astonished and amazed at what a wonderful job Monique does. And we sit and listen to the wonderful writers that Monique introduces us to. And tonight, we wanted to make something special for Monique. And to welcome Jen. So I think Bridget has outdone herself. Let's see. It's an Inkwell. And yes, it is edible. The top is gluten-free chocolate for those who have gluten problems. The bottom is coconut, and on the inside it's key lime. There's dishes and knives and forks, so after the reading, please help yourself. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Monique.
Thank you so much, Donna and Bridget. Looks very amazing. Great. Up next, we have Matthew McGevna. He was born and raised in Mastic Beach, Long Island. Born of Irish descent, he attended fiction and poetry workshops in Galway, Ireland, through the University of Arkansas Writing Program. An award-winning poet, McGevna has also published numerous short stories in various publications, including Long Island Noir, Epiphany, and Confrontation. He currently lives in Center Moriches, New York. Little Beast is his first novel. Let's give him a round of applause.
Good evening, my name is Matthew McGevna. This is my third time actually reading at KGB Bar. When I was younger, I used to come here to watch Kaylee read, and always inspiring to come here and read. So when I got invited here for the first time, and each time that I've been invited to read, it's pretty awe-inspiring. Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve it, but then again, my eyesight went bad and I didn't deserve that either. So I take the good with the bad. This is a Little Beast, a novel that's loosely based on a true crime. It took place in Long Island. A young boy had rocks stuffed down his throat and suffocated. Their alleged reason for having done it was that they wanted to prevent him from ratting out to the cops that they had stolen a bicycle frame. And so I imagine that it probably started out as just sort of a bullying incident where they were sort of pushing him around, and then it just escalated from there and turned violent. But I was very impacted by that crime as a young child. It happened to town a little bit of ways from where I lived, but as a young person you sort of internalize a lot of things you're told. So I always sort of envisioned it having happened in my town, and so I avoided teenagers as a young child all the time. I would see them on the corner and I'd just change directions or go around and take the back roads. So that was sort of the little nugget of inspiration that caused me to write this novel, which was much longer than the original, but got it down to fighting weight. And this section I want to read is just a section where the parents of the boy who's been murdered are home. And they're just sort of, the funeral is taking place and they're getting ready to, the trial is about to be happening, and they're just in their living room and living sort of in their own world simultaneously, trying to make some sense of what had happened to them and get that, you know, sort of get their feet back on the ground. This is probably the last time I'm going to read this, because I have read this 2 other times, but I figured, you know, might as well share this with you as well. This is a chapter. So all you really need to know is that these are the parents of the child who was murdered, and the mother was under threat of losing her job as a hall monitor in the local high school because she had witnessed an act of bullying and wouldn't go along with lying about what happened, so that the boys who committed the bullying could get away with it. So it starts out in this chapter. The mother is at the kitchen sink. Got a letter from the school yesterday. Says, due to the outpouring of support from the community, no, the overwhelming outpouring of support from the community, they're looking forward to me returning next year. Rebecca Darwin laughed bitterly as she rubbed a bowl of her towel-draped hand. They called it a difficult summer and would like to see the new school year as a fresh start. A sink full of dishes floated in bright suds. She placed the dry bowls where left and stared down at the water, bit her bottom lip, and held a palm to her head. Apparently my job was under more of a threat than I thought, so they're doing me the favor of holding open a job they had no right to threaten to take away in the first place. Isn't that nice of them? She always had headaches now, dull ones and sharp ones that poked just behind an ear or an eye. She steadied herself at the sink. This was a dull one. They're going to pity me, welcome me back, and then pass me those looks. Rebecca reached into the sink as though it was a magic hat and pulled out a glass. She could count the seconds between any household chore and her next thought of her son. The boy emerged from the darkening sink water. He formed in the dust on the end tables. He wafted from the heat of the oven. His voice rattled in baritone thuds with the submerged dishes settling down after she removed the glass. There was this one time, Dallas wanted me to go see a movie that was coming out, and he was begging me, and I said I couldn't let him because I hadn't passed it by you or Minister Roberts yet. I told him I didn't even know where it was playing. So he sulked in his room, and he must have seen the ad for the movie because he came running out all excited. He said, "It's coming to a theater near us, Mom. It's at a theater near us." Never made me laugh so hard before then. He was full of all those little lines that he thought was serious. But that's what made it funnier. And I want to tell that story. I never thought to tell it before, and now I want to. Reaching blindly into the sink, she drew out a plate. But I can't, because the moment I tell it, I'm going to get that pitiful look, and it's going to ruin the whole point. I want to tell it, but I can't, and it pisses me off that I can't tell it. Michael, are you listening? You're telling it now, Rebecca, Michael said absently. He'd been sitting at the dining room table ever since he drifted in through the front door, wearing Rebecca's robe and carrying an empty glass. Yeah, maybe. She turned back to her dishes. But who's listening, she thought. He'd not been making much sense lately. He developed a habit of sitting up all night in the living room. The past 3 or 4 days had been the worst. As soon as he stopped vomiting, every morning he'd start to mix his drinks. Then he'd scrutinize the wallpaper in the living room and take out sheets of paper and draw a new pattern. He kept insisting it was their ticket out. Rebecca remembered Michael's boss telling him to take all the time he needed before returning to work, but that was a while ago. Now Michael's boss would call and she'd hear Michael repeating yes continuously, capitulating. A lot of yes I knows and yes we'll sees. Meanwhile, the checks had stopped arriving in the mail, but every time she tried to rouse him to action, he'd say something meaningless and gloomy, and it would infuriate her. Even news of David Westwood's trial wouldn't stir him to get dressed or raise his voice. He'd been so right about so much in their marriage, and trouble had its way of shaking out with the passage of time. That's what he'd said about the whole incident with the hallway fight. Her mind, so vividly filled with violence now, cast back effortlessly to the boy walking out of the nurse's office with his parents, the hem of his skirt sweeping the dusty floor. Had she judged him? She had. She judged his parents. But when it came time to cover her for Mr. Ragon's son, she couldn't do it. The day she had resolved to lie for the bully, she'd seen the fragile boy coming down the hall. Odin. Strange name for a strange boy with a strange look. But when she saw him that day, he looked nothing like the boy she'd rescued. His black skirt was replaced with brand new jeans. His hair was shorter, and his nails were washed clean. If not for the fading cut beneath his right eye and the scab formed at his bottom lip, she may have never recognized him. And when he saw her, when he looked up from watching the floor, he stopped in his tracks. He stared at her a good while, and she gave him a familiar smile and waved, but he didn't return the gesture. In fact, he turned around and retreated back down the hallway in the other direction. Her gaze remained fixed on the empty space he'd once filled in the hallway, and somehow she sensed that it was not the bruises that made him feel ashamed to face her. In that instant, she resolved to push forward and tell the truth. The sight of Odin disappearing around the corner steeled her nerves. It would all have to lead wherever it led. Man plans, God laughs. Michael hadn't even questioned why she changed her mind, and she loved that about him. Not everything had to be said. He just promised that in the spiritual timeline of an ordered universe, all paths lead to justice. Now it's just a matter of waiting. Waiting for him. Waiting for his eyes to blink on. Was the way to rescue him not to come to his rescue? That kind of rationalization was just convenient. The truth, she was exhausted. The phone rang. Rebecca watched it while she dried a glass. Finally, it stopped. She looked through the kitchen doorway at her husband. He'd gone to pour himself another drink, but she noticed that he turned the glass upside down and covered the mouth of the bottle. She looked away. She'd become more self-conscious about watching him. The phone rings all the time, Rebecca said. If it's not that reporter from the Turndale Times, it's someone from work. I have nothing to say. There are no words to make them understand, but I can't say that, because then they say, I know, I know. Is there anything I can do? That one's the worst. What do they think they can do? And it will only get worse when I go back to work in September, that's for sure. I'll get into the building and the lounge will be filled with baskets and flowers from people I don't know. And every person I see will drop their eyes and mumble something. And to see all those kids passing by and goofing off and kissing in the hallways, some of them were probably friends with those animals. And the worst part of it will be watching them all slowly forget, watching everyone around me start to laugh again and tell their Easter stories and forget to hide pictures of their grandchildren. Not that hiding them would be any less painful. They'll all start to move away from it and forget about it. People have short attention spans for other people's suffering. They'll move on. Reaching into the warm water seemed to soothe her. She pulled out another dish and heard her utensil settle to the bottom of the sink. I called my boss after I got the letter and I told him I wasn't coming back. He got real silent on the phone, and then he did just as I thought. He told me the job would always be open for me in the future. He had that tone of voice on the other end. I could feel his discomfort. I can't bear to go through that. I'll climb down into my own grave before I have to endure that. I know this puts more pressure on you. It's the last thing you need, Michael. I know that, but I can't do it. I have to stay away from that place. Rebecca looked over at her husband. He'd risen from his chair and gone to the window. Lately, he hadn't been listening. Not really. Just her general tone. Apologetic but angry, restless and annoyed. Her tone seemed to always be reaching for some purpose, but the words it carried landed just inches short before the feet of purpose. He knew this now that he hadn't been listening, and felt in some way that turning over his glass on top of the open neck of the bottle was the first thing he'd been aware of consciously doing since... And yet, even his distraction from what she was saying to him moments before felt different than the way he'd been tuning her out in the past few weeks. She couldn't know that, but it was true. Another conscious thing. He felt a tingling sensation behind his ears. The young Ilworth boy preoccupied him. Seeing him piece all his materials together to build that treehouse had somehow cast Michael back to his own youth. He didn't build tree houses, they didn't interest him. He dove for clams in South Bay with his uncle. A smile nearly reached his face as he watched the trees in his backyard form a wall of shadows from the world. He wouldn't tell Rebecca just then. It wouldn't make sense to her, but he told himself about the clams. How his uncle showed him the way to dig with his toes. How to decide by feel what is a stone, what is the elongated black shell of a mussel, what is a baby horseshoe crab, what is the colony of snails clinging to a sea sponge, what is the broken tooth of an old anchor, and at last, what is a clam? The surf clam snuggled in the arch. The quahog was a golf ball wedged under the toes. Then how to hold his breath, dive down into the murky brine and reach blindly into the mud beneath his foot. Grab the clam and firmly pull it from the bed. How his uncle always told him the best part of climbing was that if you missed it for the first time, you could always dive back down to get it. The same way he'd learned to stay afloat when the waves surged and lifted him from his feet by keeping his face turned toward the sun, by taking deeper breaths. Otter, he muttered, his voice broken. The nickname his uncle had assigned to him, for all the many times he had to dive back down into the now disturbed water to redeem himself. He grinned inside the memory, pressed his forehead to the window pane. The rush of cold from the glass felt good against his brows, which ached every day. What sounded like a squeak escaped from Rebecca's voice, and Michael rolled his head to look at her. What is this thing they had? What word or phrase existed that could somehow describe how they'd been avoiding each other while they still slept in the same bed, ate at the same table, held hands to the silence of the ticking clock on the living room wall? How many times this week did they hug each other? How often did one dry the other's tears with their own sleeve or their hair, or press their faces tight against one another? And yet, they divorced each other somehow. They'd clung to small facts that were meaningless. She had said to him a few weeks ago, "You were going to beat him." He had pointed out how she always fought him on getting to church early, and if they had gone early on that day. And yet, it wasn't divorce. It was the furthest thing from it. Michael watched her as she methodically dried her dishes and allowed himself to see her standing before him on their wedding night. How she had dropped her paper-thin nightgown on the floor with a flirtatious finger and bit her bottom lip. It was all he could do to stay a gentleman. They'd known without speaking when it was time for Dallas. They collapsed into each other that night, and the night after, and the night after, until she finally emerged one night from the bathroom crying. She was standing in the kitchen drying dishes, and yet she was that woman. She was all of those women, a culmination of a life lived. And even though everything had changed, none of it could change. If anything could be said of his faith in God, it was that, though boiled away and maybe gone forever, He could not deny that the past would often circle back and become the present. And here was the proof, he thought, as he watched Rebecca in the dimming light from the kitchen become that woman who stood before him at the foundation of his world. Flesh of my flesh, he thought, and he knew what he meant. Michael went up behind Rebecca at the sink and wrapped his arms around her waist. "I'm sorry," he said, and kissed her squarely between his shoulder blades. Tomorrow, he told himself, he'd pull his tie on with his face turned toward the sun. He'd step into his old shoes, which were now his new shoes, for nothing would ever feel comfortably nostalgic again, and he knew he still had miles of regrets ahead of him. He felt Rebecca's hands grip his arms, which were now cinched around her waist. He was no longer a little boy, but in that warm instant, he could hear something like a voice singing from his heart. Dive back down, dive back down. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Up next, we have our special guest of the night. Monique will be reading. I'm sure all of you know. Monique Antoinette Lewis is the founder of At the Inkwell, which supports published authors through readings, book reviews, and feature articles. She is an annual reader for the James Jones First Novel Fellowship and teaches fiction for the New York Writers Workshop, of which she is a former board member. She was also the fiction editor of City Lit Rag. Her writing has appeared in Fuse Society magazine. Monique is a specialist editor for Merger Market, an online financial news service. Prior to Merger Market, she was a reporter for the Press and Sun Bulletin and the Daily Times in Binghamton, New York, and Salisbury, Maryland, respectively. She received her MFA in creative writing from Wilkes University and a BA in journalism from Colorado State University. Monique lives in Brooklyn. Let's give her a warm welcome.
I just want to say thank you to Kaylee and Matt and Barb, and I really appreciate having you all tonight. And it's been an honor to read alongside you tonight. So, okay. So I am going to read an excerpt of a short story, and it's called Macy's and the Maid. And it's about a young woman who is obsessed with one of her male clients in New York City. And she's a maid, as the title says. The young woman walks east along 34th Street, where tourists crowd Macy's famous window scenes. She looks over her shoulders to catch a glimpse of the first one. A father holds his little girl on his shoulders as she reaches up to place a star on the tree, while the mother prepares cookies and milk on a table nearby. In the next window, a little boy mails a letter to Santa as shoppers enter and leave a miniature Macy's store model in the snowy background. The third story saddens her. A couple sits in rocking chairs, holding hands, watching their children play with toys on the floor. She frowns and stares at it for a long time until she can no longer feel her bare fingers. She balls two fists in her coat pocket as she runs inside the store. The first time the young woman stepped into the 11-level department store was on her 15th birthday, when her favorite aunt flew her to New York City during the Macy's Flower Show. Every day she looked at the windows filled with mannequins wearing swooping dresses made of large autos thrilled dahlias, mums and peonies standing on carpets of blue hydrangeas. No store had ever felt so beautiful as she strolled past the designer perfume tables, sparkling jewelry, and glittery clutches. It was nothing like the Macy's back home in New Mexico. She told her aunt she lived in New York, she would visit Macy's every day. When the young woman moved to the city, she wanted to recreate that magical feeling each time she stepped into Macy's. But once you've lived in New York for a few years, it never feels quite the same. It comes in unexpected moments, and even those don't last as long as you'd like. They fade into memories distracted by the constant duty of work. Even when the woman isn't working, she's working to make friends, working to steal a seat on a stuffy subway car, working to beat oncoming traffic to cross the street, and working to catch a very rare taxi ride across the bridge. Exhausted as she is from the day, she dreads evenings in bed, when she has too much time to think. While she makes strangers feel welcome to come home, high school friends are getting engaged, married, buying a home, and having babies. Each summer had become a string of announcements and invitations. The closer she got to Friday, the easier she slept. The cartoonist on West 74th Street in Amsterdam likes to hold his crystal vases up to the fluorescent lighting to check for smudges. He only sees a young woman on his work from home day, Fridays. She stands off to the side, hands clasped behind her. She's always jumpy around him. "Excellent," he says, pushing his glasses up his nose. He twirls a vase in a controlled fashion. Sometimes she imagines what it would be like to take off those dorky glasses. They are too big for his face and hide his blue eyes. She often wonders if there is another in his life. Each visit, she checks for suspicious signs of a woman's presence. First the medicine cabinet, followed by the sock drawers. She saves the bedroom closet for last, the defining measure. If all was clear on the front, only then could she breathe and get to work. The cartoonist sets one of the crystal vases back into the glass display case and hands a $50 tip to the young woman. She stuffs the money in her small backpack and grabs her cleaning supplies to leave. On her third-floor walk-up studio in Brooklyn, the woman has to turn the key in a rigging motion, unlocking, locking, and unlocking again before it pops open. Luna purrs, following her feet as she lazily walks to the couch and drops her hobo bag to the floor. She stares at a 3-foot tree with missing branches on the windowsill. The salesman sold it to her for $10, and she decked it out with white lights, miniature balls, snowmen, and nutcrackers. Luna rubs her black fur against her calf. "Treat me, treat me." The woman wishes someone would treat her for a change. She doesn't even like cats and is partial to dogs. But Luna's big yellow eyes reminded her of an eerily crescent moon. She found her wrapped in a dirty rag in Prospect Park, shivering in the cold. Charity is her biggest crutch. If she could exchange it for ruthlessness like her father, maybe then she wouldn't be cleaning houses. But if she had to pick a real career, any of her choice, she couldn't decide. She's a klutz at dancing, hates numbers, can't hold a perfect pitch, writing bores her, and children make her nervous. Cleaning comforts her. As a child, she used it as her escape. No one could lecture her, force unwanted errands upon her, or make her entertain boring family friends. She liked the way a clean room felt complete, more welcome to stand in. The following Monday, the cartoonist's door is ajar, which is unlike him. He is very particular about everything being in its place, so particular that he folds his dirty laundry. The young woman stands in the hallway, unsure about whether to enter. She pushes the creaky door and walks inside the living room. She hears papers ruffling in the bedroom and pokes her head into the hallway. He is tossing boxes onto his bed. Perhaps he noticed she had been going through his things and wants to spy on her. She takes a seat on the sofa, on a leather chair, itchy palms stuffed between her knees. It seems like hours pass by when he finally comes out of the bedroom. She shuts her eyes. "Earth to Eva," he says. She opens her eyes and sees a mint green bag dangling in his hands. It's been 3 years, and not once has he given her a gift. What is it?" she asks, looking up at him. "Open it." She takes the bag and unties the strings and the handles, carefully unwrapping the paper in her lap. Inside were a pair of black leather gloves. "Now your hands won't freeze to death," he says, squeezing her palms in his. A wave of shock tickles her hands up to her chest. "Thank you," she whispers. "I hope you enjoy them." "Oh, I will," she says. He grabs his briefcase and leaves. The young woman sits for a long time in the same spot, stroking the gloves, every inch of them. She has never owned a leather pair. She replays the image in her head, the way he looked at her and touched her hands. She has to return the favor. She finishes cleaning his place early and calls out sick to remaining clients. Strolling Macy's men's department, she almost turns back. This is a bad idea. What is she thinking, blowing off clients? But he had noticed her. He knew she didn't wear gloves, only what does she buy not to come off too desperate? "A man always looks good in a nice tie," her mother once said. A tie is akin to a woman's shoe. She has to get it right. Browsing tables of silk ties, she holds up a black diamond print in her left hand and a solid green one in her right. Of all the time she looked in the cartoonist's closet, not one suit comes to mind that these ties would match. "Can I help you, miss?" asks a young male clerk wearing red suspenders. She feels as if this stranger has caught her in a dirty secret. She looks at the ties and shakes her head. "Yes." The male clerk smiles and gently takes the ties from her hands. "Is this for a gift?" "Yes," she blurts. He shakes a finger in the air, nodding his head as he walks to another table of trays. Let's go with conservative, with a slight amount of detail. Red, white, black, or blue is a universal gift tie. He grabs a red tie with blue dots and a black one with white stripes. You want to give just enough accent to whatever color shirt he is wearing. Is it 100% silk? Yes, feel how light it is. She takes the ties and imagines the cartoonist trying it on for her. I'll take these, thank you. You're welcome, happy holidays, ma'am. The register totals $80. It was set her shopping day back 1 month. She had been saving for a nice pair of jeans. Twice she goes back to Macy's, bag and receipt in hand, and each time she looks up at the great sign on the great giant sign in the corner, rubs her gloved hands together, and shuffles her feet against the mushy brown snow back to the subway. The young woman moves the red gift box wrapped in gold sheer ribbon from his bed to the living room table to the kitchen counter. Neither spot seemed appropriate, each too intimate, too daring, too desperate. Instead, she waits on the sofa with the gift box in her lap, fingers trembling. She stands at attention when she hears the door unlock. Hello, Eva, the cartoonist says. He slips out of his wet boots in the hall before stepping inside to hang his coat. The woman shuts her eyes and breathes, counting 1, 2, 3, in concentrated short breaths. She is sure he will see her heart pounding. Crossing her arms, she walks up to him and unintentionally shoves the gift in his chest. For you, she says. He takes a half step back and grows red in the face. I wasn't sure if it was your style, but I hope you like it. He unties the ribbon and opens the red box. The woman folds and unfolds her arms as he ruffles the wrapping paper to find the ties. Thanks, he says, quickly stuffing the ties back into the box and setting it on the wall table. He walks to the kitchen to inspect his crystal vases. Beautiful job as always, Eva, he says. The young woman looks at the box and at him. He could have at least tried one of them on. She yanks her coat off the hanger, knocking it off the closet rack. The cartoonist reaches for his wallet from his back pocket and hands her the tip. The woman frowns and snatches it. Are you all right, he asks. I'm fine, she says in a short tone. He watches her lace her boots. Have I done something? She could tell him he was a jerk for pretending to care, that she felt stupid for obsessing over him, that she wishes she never bought the damn ties, that she never met him. Instead, she simply says, no. The young woman cries as she walks back to her car, trying to hide her tears from onlookers, even though it doesn't matter. A mother offers a pitiful look as she wheels a stroller, a man carrying groceries avoids eye contact, and an old man standing behind a fruit stand says, such beautiful face, why are you crying, baby? He makes a sad face and she keeps walking, head down, bald fist shoved in her pockets. She cannot go back to cleaning the cartoonist's home. She tosses her backpack and cleaning supplies into the company van, wishing she could crawl into bed and cry herself to sleep with Luna by her side. She yanks off the gloves and throws them into a trash can in the corner. He didn't even say thank you, just a lousy thanks. He acted as if the ties were nothing the way he quickly discarded them. He was ungrateful and she wants him to know it. She turns around and runs back to the apartment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monique. I think we're all dying to know how that story ends. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. Thank you to all the readers. I think tonight went really well. Fortunately, this is Monique's last series here in New York, but hopefully she'll be back soon to host again. Thanks again, everyone.